Hello, welcome back to the channel. I have a fun video for you today, a little bit of a blast from the past. I was cleaning out my email the other day, and I found a submission for the 2017 Highlander Championship, a decklist submission. So for those who aren't aware, at Yellow Jacket, which is the store that Canadian Highlander sort of originated from, there is every year a year-end championship where the top 8 players, as determined by the annual, like the tournaments that happen throughout the year, play to determine who the year-end winner is. And the structure of that has been a little different basically every year since Highlander has existed. So like at varying different times you've acquired points in different ways, but broadly speaking, you win a tournament, you get a point. Is an approximate way of noting it. Now it's like slightly more nuanced because it's now like if you are undefeated at the end of the night, you get a point. That's not how it always used to be, but at any rate, short version is you get points by doing well, mostly by going undefeated in tournaments, and then the top 8 point getters at the end of the year compete in a championship, which as of 2017 is broadcast by Loading Ready Run. So 2017 was the first year that they did this, I'm almost certain. Yeah, 2017 an interesting year. I was on the council for half of 2017, and I was handling decklist submission for the championship because I also helped commentate it. So it was commentated by myself, Nelly, Serge, and Alex. Jeremy was not involved because, spoiler alert, he qualified for the tournament as a player. So so he wasn't doing it. But other than that, it was the old North 100 crew plus some of the new North 100 crew. So yeah, I decided to go kind of down the rabbit hole a little bit, do some research, see if I could find all the deck lists I could. Good news. And they were also posted in that Loading Ready Run stream, which I will link in the description here. If you want to go and actually watch the games, I'll link that video as well. I'm sure many of you will have already seen it as well. But I thought it would be fun to kind of go through and use this as a snapshot to look at what Highlander looked like kind of pre-fire design, because 2017 it's still a couple of years before things really started going downhill in terms of the design philosophy. But I think looking at these deck lists now and comparing them to how the meta looks in 2025 is pretty fascinating, actually. I will give a small spoiler warning. I will probably tell you approximately where people placed in the tournament. It is an 8-year-old tournament, so spoiler alert, I am probably going to offhandedly mention how people did. So if you want to watch the tournament first before you come back here, feel free to, but I think you could probably also just watch this video and then go watch it if you were interested. So let's start with one of the first things I found, and this is a pretty funny one. So this is an article that I wrote along with current council member Spencer, which is a list of player profiles for all of the players who qualified. And you can see at the bottom here by us. This is actually still available on the Canadian Highlander website. So if you want to go read this, you can go find it. You got to go back a ways in the articles, but but it's here. And one of the things that I like about this is that Spencer and I guessed at what people were going to play in the tournament. So we'll maybe go back and review that a couple of times throughout the video. The short version for how the tournament worked this year was that there were Monday and Thursday tournaments this year, which means that it was there were a lot more points to be had. Normally qualification happened with only Monday tournaments being considered, but this was a year where we were trying to get people to come to Thursday Night Highlander, and so as a result we decided to award a qualifier point for Thursday Night Highlander, and that resulted in a real inflation of the number of qualifier points you needed to make the finals. For comparison's sake, when only Monday Night Highlander awarded a qualifier point for winning, you could conceivably make top 8 with 2 or 3 qualifier points. conceivably. Usually there would be like a tie and maybe one or two people would make it. It sort of depended on how many points got sucked up by people at the top of the list. That often happens, that the top like 3 players will win like 50% of the QPs for the year. But depending on how much that happens, you could conceivably qualify with like 2 or 3 qualifier points. So with this system where there were considerably more qualifier points that are being awarded, you actually needed 10 to qualify. 10 was the lowest number that anyone had to qualify with. So that's kind of an interesting thing about this year. Although I will note that of the top 8 competitors from this year, in 2018, the subsequent year, I think the list of people who qualified for that tournament is only different by maybe 2 players. And so it is a testament that these, I don't think this is a fluke. I do think these were some of the best 8 players in the city at the time. So that's kind of the tournament structure. And then what happened was you place 1 through 8, and you actually are incentivized to keep playing and to try and get a higher qualification point by the tournament structure, which is if you finish first, you get to choose one of the players 5th through 8th as your opponent for round 1. Second place chooses one of the other remaining players in the bottom 4. The third player also chooses one of the 2 remaining players in the bottom 4. And then the 4th place person gets to pick which group they and their opponent, who is the last remaining person from the bottom 4, are going to be in, which creates 2 4-player groups and then their GSL group. So if you're not familiar with the structure, the way it works basically is that you play kind of like a double elimination bracket. And if you ever get to 2 wins, you get out of the bracket and you're into the top 4. And if you ever get 2 losses, you're eliminated completely. So there's 2 matches to start. The winners of those matches play, and the winner of the winner's match will qualify on. And then the losers play, and the winner of the loser's match gets to try one more time to qualify. And they play against the loser of the winner's match. So if you've ever watched StarCraft, which I know our demographics skew a little older, so hopefully there are some people who used to stay up watching the GSL in like the 2000s, like me. But if you weren't familiar with that structure, that's basically what it is. So that's how it worked this year, and it means that people make interesting deck list choices because you're sort of incentivized to potentially try and metagame a little bit. If you're in the top position, you can try and guess what someone in the bottom 4 might play and maybe try and like snipe an easier matchup in round 1 in particular, because the reality is you need to win 4 games to win the championship. You need to win 2 to get out of your group, and then you need to win a semifinal and a final. So, getting a leg up on 25% of the games you need to win is a meaningful advantage. And it also means that players in the bottom 4 are sometimes incentivized to make decisions that mean that maybe you're going to throw like a curveball. You're not going to play the deck that someone would expect you to play so that you can negate that advantage that they might have. All of this to say, I think all 8 of these deck lists that I'm going to show you are good deck lists and relatively indicative of the kinds of things that people played, but they are not always indicative of what that player played. So I'll point that out, and I'll kind of talk about what various people were expected to play and then what they did play. But without further ado, I will get into the deck list. I just want to one other thing quickly note. This is the points list as of December 4th, 2017. This tournament was played February 4th, 2018. So this tournament was played 2 months later, but this is the points list that this tournament was played on. And some things that we can look at that I think modern Highlander players are going to be shocked by. We've got like natural order at 5, which is a pretty interesting one. Like Tinker is at 4. That's actually a recent change. Recall's at 7. Walk is 5. It's 2 points less. Kind of crazy. Vault is only 6. There's some 1-pointers on here that I think look a little bit odd to people. Mana Drain had just gone on the list. This was actually relatively, I want to say relatively, I mean very. This was a contentious thing that this went on the points list in the first place. But I think now it makes a lot of sense as a 1-pointer for what it's worth. But at the time it was a bit weird. You have like Umezawa's Jite as a 2-pointer. with Stoneforge Mystic still on the list at the time. Birthing Pod is 3 points. There's a bunch of stuff here that I think maybe modern Highlander players are going to be surprised by. But I'll go through and we'll talk about it. We'll look at how the lists compare. So we're going to start with Chris S. So Chris is, I think I was doing some thinking about it. I think Chris is probably the winningest Highlander player of all time. And I mean that in the sense that I think he's won the most Highlander tournaments out of any person ever. The reason I say that is that the Yellow Jacket, or sorry, Canadian Highlander, there are other Highlander variants, and there may well be players who have been more winning in those formats. But in Canadian Highlander, at least, I think Chris is the person, because he has the combination of, he's been playing Highlander basically since its inception at Yellow Jacket. He's been winning the whole time. He's a very good player. And he still plays now. He was in this year's year-end championship. He still wins tournaments. And in this particular year, Chris qualified with 24 qualifier points, which is pretty ridiculous. And he qualified using these decks. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it's pretty funny to think that Chris could have, if you only allowed Chris to take 1 QP per deck that he won with in 2017, he would have still qualified. So one theme you will note about the decks that Chris played, they are basically all blue. The only non-blue deck was this Gruul mid-range deck, and other than that, it was 11 blue decks. Chris is someone who definitely leans towards the kind of like 3 and 4 color control variants. He really likes registering the card Ancestral Recall. That's kind of one of the cards that I think of him as playing. Yeah, Grixis Vault Twin. This is a deck of a bygone era. You can't play Twin in those decks anymore. But Chris showed up to the year end playing Mardu aggro. And what was odd about this is that Chris actually got to pick his round 1 opponent. So he knew who he was going to be playing against 100%. He got to choose. And he still decided to like really hard pivot and play something that he felt like people weren't going to be able to target. Which I thought was quite interesting. It did work. He made the semifinals, so it was a successful enough gambit, I would say. Like, making it out of your group is already, a good result. He didn't end up winning the tournament this year, but it did work. It was successful, but it was like very surprising for him to show up with Mardu. This is not a deck that he had played a lot of during the year either. It's not like it was something that he had kind of been grinding and just didn't happen to get a win with before the year end. Like, this was really out of left field. And I remember when I saw this deck list submitted, I thought, what the heck? Like, this is very, very weird that he didn't register any blue cards. So what is going on with this Mardu Initiative deck, and what are some things that we can look at? I think one of the big things that I would start with is 1-drops. So of the 1-drops that are in this deck, right, like, we have Dryad Militant is one we would probably still play today. And we have Deathrite Shaman, which is obviously maybe the best 1-drop ever. And then all of these other 1-drops are like not cards you get to register anymore, right? Like except maybe in exactly mono red, like these kinds of like black 2/1s that have recursion abilities if you meet certain criteria, like Bloodsoaked Champion and like Isamaru, just into vanilla 2/2. Like, these cards are just not at the appropriate power level anymore, so we're not really allowed to play those. So that's kind of thing number one that I think is pretty interesting of the things. You see that these older aggro decks really were in on a lot of 1-drops, kind of almost regardless of their card quality. This deck is also doing some kind of interesting stuff. Like, we've got like Boros Reckoner in our deck to go along with our Fire Covenant. So there's a little combo here if you could ever assemble it, which is pretty funny. And then you've got like some disruptive pieces, right? So Tide Hollow Sculler appearing in this deck. You've got Leonin Arbiter as a hate bear. You've got Harsh Mentor as a hate bear. You've got Aven Mind Sensor. And you might be thinking, oh, well, These don't seem like particularly powerful hate bears, and to that I would tell you these are the ones we had, more or less. There were no opposition agents, no Orcish Bowmasters. I mean, obviously there's no Thalia in this deck, which is maybe a little bit surprising, but like we have like Spirit of the Labyrinth, another card that you basically never see registered now, and Kiln Fiend. This is like a fascinating choice, and yeah, so. You know, he's got some hate pieces, but really the best ones that were available at the time are in this deck. So then you've got like a removal suite that features like Arc Trail, Fork Bolt. These are cards that used to be like big parts of the metagame and that have largely fallen out of favor these days. You've got the discard spells. This all makes sense. The Vindicates. And then in the instance and sorcery spot, again, it's like more removal. We are playing the old Price of Progress in a deck that has two basics. Three basics, which for what it's worth, this is deck building I can get behind. I love Price of Progress in these aggro decks that you're just like casting price and it's dealing 14 and it's like 6 to me, 8 to you. Like that's just a trade you're willing to make. But yeah, that is something Chris is doing here. And then in terms of the points, his points are Triple Mox, Winter, or Tainted Pact, which is an interesting one-pointer to choose. If we go and look at the points list really quick, sorry to flashbang you. I know that this is way brighter than my dark mode theme. If we go and look at the points list, like what other one-pointer do you pick, right? Like you could Stoneforge, but there aren't actually incredible Stoneforge targets. So I do get it. I think it makes sense to end up picking this this one because I don't really see like Mind Twist is the other card I think you could consider in this list. And yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable not to choose it. Yeah, so this is Chris's list. One other thing that I will quickly point out before we move on, and you will see this as kind of a theme throughout these deck lists, is there is a deference to mono red that doesn't exist anymore. There are a bunch of cards that are being played largely for their impact in the mono red matchup. So like Gerard's Verdict is a good example of this, where like this is a reasonable card advantage card. It's just a 2-for-1, which is clean. And against mono red in particular, this card is really good because it basically reads like either you're going to discard 2 burn spells, so I'm going to gain 6 life, or you're going to discard 2 lands, so I'm going to gain 6 life. And so, yeah, you'll see people making choices, and I will point out the this is for mono red choices. Like that's one. Another one that's not really only for mono red, but is definitely good against mono red is Hide Seek. This is also, I mean, this is a card that I just think is still good now. But so this is like a disenchant. Importantly, the hide mode of Hide Seek is able to get rid of Platinum Imperion and Mono Blue or Blue Moon with Madcap Experiment for Platinum Imperion is a big part of the meta at this time. So having outs to that is important. And that is one thing that this Mardu deck did better than most of the other aggro decks is that Platinum Imperion, Schmatinum Imperium, like you killed that card very easily. And then Seek is a sweet one. Against mono red, you would just go get Fire Blast and like it would be like functionally like gain 10, you know, like you would just gain 6 life off of getting the exiling the Fire Blast, and then you would also prevent them from gassing it. But against the combo decks, a lot of them were pretty fragile in this era, and so removing one card was often enough to win the game. For example, the Storm decks of this era were basically cold to this effect. If you took Tendrils, there was no other way to win. For example, that's just one instance. So yeah, this is Mardu aggro. Chris ended up making the semifinals, so he got out of his group. I don't remember, and I could not find who was in his group, unfortunately. I believe, and this is purely anecdotal, but my recollection is that his group was himself, Robin, and Jer and Bosta. I believe those were the 4 people in his group, but I and we'll see what decks those people played as we go on, but I believe that was the group, but I could be wrong. I know that in the coverage he plays a match against Bosta, which is would insinuate that that's how the groups broke out, but it could be the other way around. But without further ado, let's move on because I don't want this to take forever. So next we have, I've titled it Ben W, but I think we all know who Ben W is. This is Ben Wheeler, who was playing Paradox Academy at the 2017 Highlander Champs. So if we scroll down here, Ben had 19 QPs, pretty good number. And he played a lot of combo decks in this particular year, right? So like Eggs, Omnitel, Paradox Engine, which was new as of 2017. Kind of the first year that the deck really made waves in the scene. Yeah, Ben played some Pattern Rector, some World Gorger combo. So yeah, some Kiki Jiki, and then, you know, like a smattering of Is It Tempo and Jeskai Midrange. This is very early signs of the Jeskai Midrange deck. Jer worked on this deck a lot in 2017 as well. This was kind of when it first started to occur to people that the Jeskai portion of the color pie was maybe a little overpowered in terms of its mid-ranging ability, and we have never gone back, really. So Ben decided to play Paradox Academy. This is what both Spencer and I put him on. We both said that we thought he was going to play a combo deck of some sort. You can see I said he's a hard player to predict just because he has a huge range. But I did say he'd either play Eggs or Paradox Engine Storm. So I nailed it. And you can see Spencer thought the same thing. So way to go us. We're geniuses. But yeah, this is Paradox Engine circa 2017. Obviously, the power level is lower. There's like less really degenerately broken stuff going on. You are still doing things like tinkering for Blightsteel Colossus. This was just like a very potent effect for a long time. Hard to interact with card. One other thing, I think modern kind of like Paradox Academy lists are less in on things like Upheaval, which is a card that you see played here. But honestly, this is a deck list where not that much has changed. Like, it's gotten better. It keeps getting upgrades, like Chromatic Orrery, obviously massive upgrade for this deck. But the core concept is still the same. You're still just trying to find an engine, play some rocks, ideally ones that make multiple pieces of mana, and then ideally you're also playing some rocks that draw cards, right? Like we've got Temple Bell here doing a very poor impression of the One Ring. And you're using this to just eventually acquire enough resources to put some kind of combo together, whether that's like Rings of Brighthearth copying untaps, or if that is you know, like making a bunch of mana and Stroke of Geniusing your opponent to death. That's an out that was available. There's also like Channel for Emrakul, or just hardcast Emrakul in this deck. I pretty vividly remember Ben hardcasting Emrakul against me on like turn 2 or 3 one tournament this year, so that was a thing that happened relatively frequently. Yeah, I mean, this deck is really in on going off, right? Like 28 lands. We have a bunch of mana rocks, obviously, but only 28 actual lands. In terms of interaction, we've got City of Solitude, Defense Grid, and some hopes and dreams. This deck was planning to play through blue permission by just drawing enough high impact threats that you couldn't counter them all, which is a reasonable approach for sure. It is really cold to hate bears, but it's worth noting, again, like I said, like Collector Oof, not a thing in 2017. So you weren't necessarily so concerned about getting blown out by something like that, which is another reason why you see there's like literally not a removal spell in this deck. There's no bounce spell, no removal spell. There's no way to take a permanent off the table. And that was because I think, to Ben's mind, there weren't permanents that could be put into play that were unbeatable, which I think is kind of true. To be completely honest with you, I don't think that that's a ludicrously off base theory for this deck. Ben did quite well. He, I believe, lost to Get Out of Groups. Yeah, I think he lost to Get Out of Groups. So I believe he didn't quite qualify on. Is that right? Or did he lose in the semifinal? He might have lost in the semifinal, actually. But at any rate, he did very well in the year. And this is, I think, an interesting one. This is sort of one of the first decks that you are going to see from this top 8 that is still played now. And a bunch of the decks, spoiler alert, maybe you're already looking ahead here in the tabs, but a bunch of the decks that are being played in this top 8, you don't see played anymore. So it's kind of interesting for sure. Okay, let's move on. Excuse me. Let me get a drink of water here, actually. Okay, so let's move on to... oh, sorry. Before we move on, let's look at what Ben's points were. So Ben's points were Soul Ring Tinker, Ancient Tomb, Mana Vault, Tolarian Academy. So if we want to go back and reverse engineer what these points actually were, Tinker was 4, so that brings us up to 10, but Ancient Tomb was free, so that brings us back down to 9. So what was our last point? Was it Channel? No, Channel wasn't a point. Enlightened Tutor was not a card in this deck, right? No. So what was our last point? Mana Vault. Academy wasn't on the list at the time. None of these things were on the list. Oh, is it Mishra's Workshop? Was that one a point? No, we're looking for a 1-pointer here. Oh, Transmute Artifact. There we go. Got there. Yeah, Transmute Artifact was a... Oh no, maybe I'm wrong. You have that one? Yeah, Transmute Artifact. There we go. So Transmute Artifact, that's the last point. So that's... This deck is pretty similar to how you would play it today, honestly. Like, you would change some cards, you would upgrade a lot of the artifacts as well, but other than that, it's a pretty interesting look. Kulotha Forge Master may be one you would leave at home these days too. Okay, so next on the list we have Jer. Obviously very exciting. Jer, similar to Chris and Ben, had a litany of decks that he won qualifier points with. He also, I think, meets the criteria of he could get 1 point from each deck that he got a QP from and would have still potentially queued. He had 10 different decks that he won QPs with. 11? Are we at 11? Yeah, it's 11. So for Jer, obviously the range is even bigger than Chris, right? You see there's some kind of blue control mid-range decks, mono blue control, or Seinfeld. This deck at the time is hilarious. Could not beat a 1-drop, but beat other things. Selesnya mid-range, or like Green White Little Kid, as that deck is sometimes called. Food Chain is a sweet one. Mono black control, this was like a big black control deck that was like hard casting Root Scarred Demon and stuff. Very sweet. Naya Zoo, this is a deck from a bygone era. I mean, I know people are playing Naya again a little bit, but it used to be that this kind of like 1-drop focused Mox deck with this 1-drop focused Mox Naya deck was like very powerful. Orzhov mid-range is maybe one you could play. And Rug Scape Shift is a sweet one that Jer worked on pretty extensively and obviously still likes now. So I worked with Jer to prep for the top 8 until I started receiving deck lists, obviously, at which point I stopped. But I remember that his theory was basically that he wanted to not really overthink the metagaming aspect of it and just pick something that was going to be good into the whole field. And part of the reason was he kind of already got the advantage of being hard to predict because he could register one of 20 decks. So it wasn't as though people were necessarily going to be able to really metagame against him anyway. And so that was part of why he made the choices he did. You'll note that Spencer guessed some form of blue-white X mid-range with tuned hate pieces, and I forget what I wrote. Yeah, I said white-blue decks. Yeah, I just said blue cards, but he could also show up playing like green-white aggro, which is true. But Jared did decide to show up with blue cards, which, good choice on his part. And maybe at some point we can get his direct feedback on this as well. But this is blue-white control circa 2017. Very cool look at kind of like what I would describe as like boomer control these days, right? We have like Azor, the Lawbringer. This is like the on attack Sphinx's Rev card. We've got like Torrential Gearhulk, Jace the Mind Sculptor, like 5 Planeswalkers, most of which cost 4 or more mana, like very sick. You've got some stuff here that I think is like more modern, right? Like Terminus is here. Entreat the Angels is here as the this is what we used to have to play instead of 4th Earlingus, right? So like instead of mysticaling for 4th, you could mystical for Entreat, and that would end the game pretty quickly. This deck is honestly doing a lot of the same things that you would kind of expect blue-white control to do now. Excuse me. I will say that blue-white control is hard to play now. And a big part of why is that it's pretty challenging to not just get run over by some of the really powerful mid-range threats. In air quotes, I call them mid-range, but really like they're 2-drops. You know, like if a Psychic Frog resolves against you on this blue-white control deck and they have counter magic to back it up, you know, you're in rough shape. You do not have access to a ton of 1-for-1 cheap removal. And that was still true at this time, right? Like you see Jared reaching for cards like Cast Out and Vidalcan Shackles as removal. And part of this was a testament to the fact that there just was not that great of a removal suite available. And the other part of it was, at least for a long time, and certainly in this era, blue-white was relying on spending the first 3 turns of the game just kind of like developing its mana, maybe casting a card draw spell, maybe interacting with something that you did. But if you were just playing to the board and playing creatures, blue-white wanted to use its life total as a resource and then clean those all up with a Wrath. And that was kind of the plan, and increasingly that's not a thing you can do. That game plan, you're going to take too much damage, or your opponent is going to accrue too much value, and you really do need to be interacting on a more 1-for-1 basis, and then looking to make up the advantage with other forms of card advantage. But at the time, this kind of strategy was quite potent. You have a nice little flash sub-theme here, because this deck, by and large, didn't want to be tapping out for its threats. You were pretty interested in holding up mana most of the time. So like we've got Archangel Avacyn, Alms Collector. This is like a mirror breaker card in a way. It's Hall Breacher at home, for sure. And then in terms of like how you were actually trying to, like stabilize and get to those threats, we have a lot of counter spells. You will notice I'd mentioned the deference to mono red being a theme, and you see it a lot in this blue-white control deck, right? Like Absorb is a card that is definitely a acknowledgement that mono red is a thing. You have things in this deck like, well, you know, actually it's interesting. Jared's specific deck list here is a lot lower on kind of anti-blue-white control cards or anti-mono red cards than you might be. For example, like some people would play Moat in this blue-white control deck. I know Jared has definitely reached for Moat before, and he chose not to for this tournament. I think in part because if you looked at the top 8 players who queued for this event, you would not have necessarily put many of them on exactly mono red. Some of them were people you might think would play aggro, but not mono red. And so you can actually see there's less deference to mono red here than there would normally be. You do have like Azor the Lawbringer as this way to like gain life in the late game, but that's quite late in the late game. You also have former Highlander staple Comeuppance. This is a sweet one. I encourage you to to read this one and try and understand how it works. The short answer is it basically says you can't take damage this turn, and any damage that would be dealt to you is dealt back to the thing that would have dealt it. So creatures deal damage to themselves, which is pretty sweet. Like this is like a way to potentially like wrath someone's board. And more importantly, this was a good card against mono red, because like if they put a flurry of burn spells on the stack, or let's say they put Price of Progress on the stack, and you were able to come over the top with the Comeuppance, they might die. They might 10 themselves or like 14 themselves with their own Price of Progress through the old Comeuppance. So that's a sweet one. Honestly, maybe we got to bring this one back. It's only a single white pip. It's splashable. Like, surely this one's good enough to get some include somewhere. I'm going to try and play this card. Other sweet ones that Jared's playing here are like Porphyry Nodes. This is a Jared classic for sure. So this is a card that is used to help control the size of boards. It says, at the beginning of your upkeep, destroy the creature with the least power. It can't be regenerated. If 2 or more creatures are tied, you choose. And then if there are no creatures, it dies. And so like this card was really powerful because it forced the aggro players to decide what they were going to do. They either needed to take usually multiple turns off, because you would play this, the next turn it would kill something, and then if they had completely taken their next turn off from playing creatures, they could sometimes let this only be a 1-for-1, but it would be like a 1-for-1 plus all your mana for that turn, because a lot of the aggro decks didn't necessarily have access to flash threats or things to be doing with their mana that weren't just playing more creatures. So this was really powerful at both being like a 1-for-1 or 2-for-1 removal spell usually, but then also it bought you time, because the aggro player couldn't really feasibly choose to just try and jam through this thing and keep putting more fodder out there to die. That wasn't a super viable strategy, especially because you could use your other removal spells to kind of like prune the board to be able to kill what you wanted to with the Profiring Nodes. So yeah, it's a sweet one, not one that sees a lot of play anymore, but this is another one that I think maybe you ought to reach for maybe a little slightly more often. It's a powerful one. Other than that, we can talk about points in this deck really quick. So you'll notice one thing right away that will probably jump off the page at you if you are a competitive player right now, which is that this is a control deck that's not playing Ancestral Recall. And although I think that that is a potentially viable thing to be doing now, certainly currently when we think blue control, we think Ancestral. It's pretty synonymous. And I guess what I would say to that is the reason why there's not Ancestral in this deck is that there's not a great way to use your resources cheaply. So you would often cast Ancestral and then die with extra cards in hand. And so instead, the control decks of this era, specifically like blue-white control, reached for things like Soul Ring. Like Soul Ring was 3 at the time, and this was a somewhat recent change. It had been 4 for a long time, and it was 4 because of its play in control decks. The complaint was that it was too good in control, and so it needed to be 4 instead of 3. And it I think when I was on the council, we lowered it to 3. It's my recollection. But yeah, so if you look at this deck, I mean, if you cast an Ancestral, like how many 1-mana removal spells do you have once you do that? The answer is like 2. You have Swords and Path. You don't have anything else. You've got a couple of 1-mana counter spells in, like Spell Pierce. I don't even think Jared's playing. Yeah, Spell Spear, Spell Snare. You've got like Mystical, but there's not that much to do with your mana. And so instead it was something of a pretty common practice to reach for a lot of 1-pointers. So like Cruise, Dig Through Time, these are cards that actually went on the points list somewhat recently. Like they lasted about a year of being printed before they got on the list. You've got True Name Nemesis, Mana Drain, Mystical Tutor. True Name Nemesis in particular was just such a house in this format. So good against your aggro decks. Like if you look at the deck that Chris sleeved up, True Name stonewalls so much of this deck, and you'll actually notice part of Chris's deck has considerations made for playing against True Name, because the card is actually really hard to kill in this era. But Council's Judgment is one of the ways that we have to kill it, and Black-White gets access to Zealous Persecution, which was actually a big deal. Having multiple ways to take care of a True Name was a really relevant part of your deck building consideration. But yeah, so in terms of what else Jared was playing that was points at the time, Library of Alexandria is another one that was a point at the time. And then what was his 10th point? I'm always so bad at finding the 10th point. Oh, Mystical was 2 at the time. That's what it was. Yeah, Mystical was 2 at the time, and I believe that accounts for all of the points. So yeah, so this is a list. It's 8 points now. I mean, you can still play blue-white control. This is not like a completely dead archetype necessarily, but it's very hard to play, I think, in the current era. So it's interesting. This deck used to be one of the 2 best control decks, and now I think that both of those decks actually that I would have put in as 1 and 2 in 2017 are way down the ladder in terms of their playability, just because of the efficacy of threats and how much they do when they hit the table. Okay, so let's move on to the biggest curveball of the season. So this is Robin S. And again, the S, I did anonymize people's names a little bit just for Moxfield, but I think most people will know who Robin S. is. This is Robin Sorensen. And in 2017, Robin played a lot of blue-white control, a lot of Blue Moon, and a lot of Jeskai. And, it's interesting. I'm looking at this list, and I misremembered, because in my head, Robin played a lot of Storm this year. But I guess he didn't, which is interesting. And I guess I must just be be misplacing when that happened. Maybe it was the next season he played a lot of Storm, or the season before. So both Spencer and I said we thought there was a reasonable chance that he was just going to bring a blue deck like Blue Moon. He'd played so much of it that it seemed pretty likely that that was what he was likely to take. And yeah, so we both had him on blue decks, although shout out to Spencer, who said he would consider a last minute audible to red deck wins or combo, as a player who once preferred to ask the question. But yeah, I can't see them resisting the siren call of one of the most successful Highlander decks of all time, Blue Moon, which is funny. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the video, just how successful Blue Moon was as a list in Highlander. But Robin registered burn. He registered red deck wins. Spencer nailed it, that it was that was a possibility, and it was the choice that Robin made. He decided to eschew playing a blue deck, I think in part because he thought there was a good chance that he would get paired into Stefan, who was definitely going to be playing blue, and he didn't want to play the mirror, which I think was fair. I understand not wanting to do that in a tournament setting where you're going to have to play 4 pretty long matches. Not wanting the first one to be a grueling blue mirror is a pretty reasonable choice. I will quickly show you. So everyone else submitted their deck list via email as like text that you could copy and paste quite easily. And Robin has a bit of a reputation for his deck list submissions. And here's what he sent me. Here, let me hide my camera for a second. So this is the deck list I got from Robin. Yep, very good. There were these nice lines here to divide mana values. I think you have 25 mountains. The points are up here. Yeah. Anyway, so that was Robin's deck list. Interestingly, this is the only deck list of the lot of them that in modern day is over points. You are not allowed to play Mana Crypt, Mox Emerald, Mox Ruby, Strip Mine. And I want, if you haven't already noticed it when I've been pulling up that points list document, I want you to guess what about this was different in the era, because it will surprise you if you don't know. And the answer is, this deck was 10 points, and it was 10 points because Emerald and Ruby were still 3. That was 6. Strip Mine was 2 points, brings you up to 8. And Mana Crypt was 2 points in 2017, in the year of our Lord. And the reason I think that is that there really weren't necessarily the same threats available that were the kind of like 2 generic mana plus 1 pip. That wasn't a thing that you really saw to the same degree. And also, in the next couple of years, people started to play this sort of like medium red style deck, which was doing a lot of the same things as red deck wins, but was going bigger and was really leveraging Mana Crypt. And that's what finally started to creep it up the points list, was the red and the white decks that were playing it. That being said, this is mono red or red deck wins. And like I said, this deck was very much so a major metagame player. You could not build a deck in this era of Highlander that was dead to mono red, both because the deck was very good, but it was also very widely played. Like Yellow Jacket at the time had maybe 6 mono red pilots. Most of them would only play mono red. Some people who would flex into it occasionally, but like there were both a lot of pilots, and a lot of the pilots were very good too. So it was a situation where you could feasibly play mono red 3 times in a night. And that was not outrageous. Like your match, you could win every match and be playing mono red that often. So definitely a deck you had to fear. A lot of 1-drops. That's definitely where the bulk of this deck came from. You really wanted to. Your best draws were where you went like either Mox double 1-drop or like 1-drop on turn 1 and then double 1-drop on turn 2, and then started to deploy 2-drops and things like that. This deck is obviously missing a lot of like the super powerful cards that we associate with mono red these days, but it does have, you know, the usual suspects for what you would expect out of mono red. You've got all of the various burn spells. In this era, we're playing like Fire Ambush, Volcanic Hammer. We're just playing all of the 2-mana deal 3s. Like literally every single one, like Incendiary Flow, Lava Spike. We've got like Flame Rift, other cards like Stoke the Flames. This is a sweet one. You'll notice that this deck has maybe a slightly more pronounced set of interactive spells for artifacts. You've got Smash to Smithereens, you've got Abrade, and then I believe, oh, and you've got Fiery Confluence, which is obviously a heater. And then are there any others? Did Robin decide to register any creatures? I don't think he did, but you could, right? Like you could register like Torch Fiend, like the 1 in a red 2/1 that for a red mana you could sack and destroy an artifact. That was a card that people registered at the time. And part of it was that you were expecting to maybe play against these like Paradox Academy decks, but then the bigger part of it is that you were expecting to play against Blue Moon and Platinum Empyrean, and it was really hard to kill the Platinum Empyrean. So you had people sliding up the number of impacts, or number of cards that could do it cleanly 1-for-1, because you really don't want to be in a situation where you're pointing multiple burn spells at the Platinum Empyrean. The game was really hard to win if you did that. Yeah, other than that, I mean, this list has a really clean mana base, 25 mountains, some creature lands, Strip Mine Wasteland, Barbarian Ring, and Rashadenport. Pretty sweet. Yeah, Robin didn't do very well with mono red. He did not make it out of his group. This was definitely a pretty big pivot, and it doesn't always work. The reality is sometimes it's better to play the thing that you know, like got to the championship playing, but I do think that the vision here made a lot of sense. The other reason I think it made a lot of sense to be the person who decided to play mono red is that this was a room where almost no one was especially likely to register mono red. And so like Jer shaved on mono red cards. His blue-white list had fewer mono red cards than you would otherwise have. And I think that it was feasible to imagine that other players would make similar choices. Yeah, so this is Robin's list. Pretty sweet. Honestly, like you could probably just chop off the bottom 20 cards from this deck, add 20 MH1 and beyond red cards, and yeah, I mean, you probably still crush some people. Okay, moving on to Adam T. Adam decided to play one of the he had a smaller kind of deck pool throughout the year, and Adam is a tuner. Adam is someone who kind of takes a deck and really wants to find the super optimized way to play that deck. Like he will play the same deck for a whole month and change like 6 cards over the course of that month. But he's a very good player and a very good tuner, especially at this time. For my money, he was maybe the best at tuning decks. So decks that he played this year, he played proto version of Jeskai Black. This is actually one of the first, I think, occurrences of someone really registering and doing well with that deck. Death and Taxes, Jeskai, these are the 3 decks that I would really associate him with. And then he did win a tournament with 4-color Kiki Pod. I mean, I think he might have won a couple of tournaments with 4-color Kiki Pod, actually. But the blue mid-range decks and the Death and Taxes decks were the ones that I would really associate with him. So what did Spencer and I say? Spencer said, yeah, Death and Taxes or Mono White is probably what he'll play, is like a Hate Bears deck. And then I said I thought he'd bring Mono White, Death and Taxes. We were on the same page. Yes, Spencer and I were locked in on this on this article. We didn't coordinate on what our thoughts were, but we clearly both thought pretty similarly about the tournament. So Adam did bring Death and Taxes. The wrinkle, the curveball, is that he registered black cards, and he didn't do this basically at all during the year. Adam played mono white like for the whole year, won a bunch of tournaments playing mono white, was like kind of crushing everyone. In particular, he was crushing the hopes and dreams of mono red players. This mono white deck was very, very good. into the red deck, Like cards like Four Firewalker at the time were like kind of stone unbeatable. And he chose to register black white for the year end. And from in talking with him and my recollections of why he did it was felt like he needed to have more game against combo and that he needed to have more game against blue decks. He didn't think that it was especially likely that anyone was registering mono red. He was right. Someone did, but for the most part, it was not unreasonable to think that he wouldn't be playing against that. And so he made the choice to splash black. By splashing black, you get access to the like Tidehole Sculler, Kitesail Freebooter style effects. You also get access to Camball, which is a pretty powerful hate bear against combo at the time. The only combo deck at the time that Camball was not like really lights out against is Time Vault. I will note in this era, Flash Hulk was in points jail. It's not that you literally couldn't play it, but like, a quick note, like a quick look, you can see Flash is 7, Protean Hulk is 3, I believe. Is it 2? Did it get lowered at this point? Oh, is it not on the list? What's going on here? Huh. I feel like this might just be missing because my recollection is that Flash Hulk was 10 at this era, in this era. October 23rd. No, we took Hulk off the list. No, that can't be right. Okay, well, I'm missing it. Maybe someone else can see it on the list and I'm just blind. This document, by the way, that I'm looking at, sorry, I forgot to give a shout out, but I will link this in the description as well. This is a wonderful document by community member Genghis Prawn, who went back and tracked every single points change throughout Highlander history. Which is very sick, very cool. All right, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it wasn't on the list. But anyway, Flash Hulk, not a card that you were really playing. Not a deck you were really playing. So the only combo deck that Camball wasn't really good against was the Time Vault deck. That was the one that you didn't really want to run into in terms of playing that hate bear, but you had other things that were good. So this deck is really a hate bears deck. You're not really mid-ranging in the same way that these white decks do now with really premium threats. A lot of what you're doing is you're deploying hate bears, and then you're using things like Palace Jailer and Restoration Angel to kind of build up an insurmountable advantage through the Monarch at the same time. So hate bears that we don't play anymore, but were very sweet at the time, are like Imposing Sovereign, Hushring Griff. These are really powerful ones. Cards that I love in this deck that it's kind of tragic that they don't see a whole lot of play anymore, like Brimaz, King of Oreskos. This card's so cool. Silverblade Paladin is another sweet one, but just like registering a 3-mana 2/2 is just like not a thing that I think most people are especially interested in. And then you also get access to the hand attack spells, very relevant reason to play black. And you also, in these white decks, it's not so common anymore, I don't think, to be playing these kind of Armageddon Ravages of War effects. More common now, for sure. And then in terms of the artifacts, you've got 2 Moxes, you've got a Chrome Mox as well. Aether Vial is a card that we used to play in 2017, and I think now is viewed as too high variance by most people. But this card was a house, and you've got to contextualize it in the format where you're expecting to play against blue decks that are going to be registering like 20 plus counter spells. Like Blue Moon and Blue White were both really hoping to interact with your creatures on the stack. They didn't want to be interacting with your creatures once they were on the board. Mostly they would rather do it on the stack. So Aether Vial is very powerful in that regard as well. One thing I will note about the points, you will see this is a 6-point deck currently because it's only Jet and Pearl are the only 2 points. So this was a 9-pointer at the time of the tournament. And the 9 points were the 2 Moxes is 6, Umezawa's Jite makes 8, and Stoneforge Mystic makes 9, and there's just not a 10th point to play in this deck. Was that an issue of the points list construction? Maybe. I'm not certain. I know when Adam played this deck as mono white, I believe he registered Mana Crypt, and I think he played Strip Mine as well. I believe he played like Mox, Mana Crypt, Strip Mine, Jite, Stoneforge, or something like that. But yeah, so spoiler alert, if you don't want to know the results, skip ahead 10 seconds, but Adam did win the tournament. So he went all the way with this deck. It was a great meta call, and the finals, I highly recommend watching. In particular, the finals are some of the better games of Magic in the whole championship. Lots of really interesting decision points, super mid-range battle-y, very cool. So yeah, this is black white kind of taxes, hate bears. This is a list that I mean, you see people registering things like this now, obviously with massively improved card quality across the board, but you do see people doing it. Yeah, this is a sweet one. I guess the one other thing I'll point out quickly is, you know, I mentioned this deck. One of the things that it did is it really beat up on red decks. You can see why, right? You have like Burtonton, Forge Tender, Kitchen Finks. These were cards that gave the red decks fits. And you were good at finding and getting one of those into play early, and yeah, a lot of the times that just resulted in it being kind of lights out for mono red. Okay, so let's move on to Stefan. Stefan brought Blue Moon, and you'll note he has 11 QPs, and they were with Blue Moon, and this bug aggro deck, I can tell you, I remember he won one QP with it. Stefan also was one of the people who worked on Paradox Academy. The year previous, especially, he did a bunch of work on it. But he ended up swapping to Blue Moon for the 2017 season, largely because it just felt unbeatable. Stefan actually moved away halfway through this year, but his 11 QPs that he acquired in the first, like, I forget, 7-8 months of the season was enough to just hold a qualification spot. So he actually flew back to Victoria, especially to play the top 8. Pretty sick. Hello, Editing Liam here. I realized when I'm watching this back, I messed up what the placements were. So you're going to hear me, when talking about Stefan's deck, mention that he did not make the semifinals. And then you'll hear me later on talk about no blue decks in the top 4, which is wrong. I mixed up Chris and Stefan's placements. So Stefan actually did make it to the top 4. Chris was the one who lost in groups. My bad. This happened 8 years ago, and I should have looked a little more closely. But yeah, just a small addendum. So what did Spencer and I say? Spencer, Blue Moon, yeah. I mean, he said he couldn't see him not playing Moon, which I think is fair. I said he was a mad scientist. God, reading some of this is really cringy. Yeah, I also said that I thought he was going to play Blue Moon, and we were right as usual. Spencer and I truly nailing it in these predictions. So this is, I think, if I was making a tier list of, like it's January 1st, 2018. What are the best decks in Canadian Highlander? I would have Blue Moon at number 1, and I think most people would have Blue Moon at number 1. It would be relatively uncontested. So this Blue Moon deck, I would give it credit for really pioneering the idea that recall plus a bunch of cheap interaction was actually the better way to play control in Highlander. For a long time, the control decks were centered around using more expensive effects to generate 2-for-1s and then eventually winning the game with Consecrated Sphinx or like Jace the Mind Sculptor. Like, these were the kinds of cards you were winning with. But like I said in talking about Jared's deck, you were playing Wraths. You were doing things where you were trying to get 2-for-1s, and you weren't necessarily like generating advantage in a way where having access to something like Ancestral Recall made sense, because you didn't have a great way to use the cards, especially earlier on in the game. And what Blue Moon did is Blue Moon said, well, okay, we're going to play Recall, and we're going to play a bunch of 1 and 2 mana interaction. And because we're going to get to play a bunch of 1 and 2 mana interaction and like cantrips and things like that, we're going to eschew most of the expensive cards, which just makes so many more hands functional, which is pretty important. The other big thing that happened for Blue Moon is the printing of Madcap Experiment. So Madcap Experiment is right here. And for those who aren't aware, our last 2 videos on the channel actually are Blue Moon videos, so you can go watch there if you want to see Jared talk about it. But this card basically says reveal cards from the top of your library until you hit an artifact. you put that artifact onto the table, and then you take damage equal to the number of cards that you revealed. So the way this combo works is that if your only artifact is Platinum Empyrean, you can flip any number of cards. The Platinum Empyrean comes into play, and then its static text that says your life total can't change negates Madcap Experiment's ability to deal damage to you. So you basically just get to play 4 mana Platinum Empyrean, and the only deck building constraint is you can't put any other artifacts in your deck, which is a real deck building constraint. I will say that's not nothing in this era of people wanting to play like Sensei Divining Top and Moxen and Sol Ring in their control decks. Like, it's not an irrelevant thing, but it's not a super relevant thing either. So yeah, so this is the list that Stefan registered. And you'll see a lot of the kind of classic Blue Moon things here. So it's got a couple of cheap threats that you're trying to win the game with eventually. Thing in the Ice, Young Pyro, True Name Nemesis. These are all pretty classic Blue Moon threats. You often won games with Platinum Empyrean as well. You've got 31 instants, and most of them are counter spells, right? Like this is one of the aforementioned approximately 20 counterspell decks. This deck had just so many counterspells. You've got the moons, so you've got Blood Moon, Back to Basics. You've got Magus as well up here. These were obviously really impactful. You've got Search for Azcanto, which is a card that I don't think people play anymore, but man, was it a house in the control mirrors at the time. And then you've just got a bunch of cheap interaction. So you've got like Flame Slash, Forked Bolt, Chain Lightning. You've got a bunch of 1 mana cantrips. We're reaching all the way down for Portent, for example, right? Like we are truly going down the deep end. And actually, it's funny. Part of the reason why we see Portent here instead of Serum Visions or Sleight of Hand is that you can target your opponent, and it actually mattered a decent amount in these older control mirrors. You would do this to decide whether or not it was safe to tap out. You could use that to kind of say, oh, okay, I know that the next 2 turns they're drawing bricks, so I'm just going to play something now. One thing that I will flag very early on about this list is that Stefan decided to play no recall Blue Moon. And I asked around a little bit, and I can't remember what his rationale was for not registering recall. And I decided not to just message him out of the blue and say, hey, 8 years ago, why didn't you register recall? But yeah, an interesting choice for sure, because he spent the whole year playing the deck with recall. The whole point of the deck was to really leverage recall. Recall got 2 points put on it over the course of the year because of Blue Moon. And it was 7 points at the time, but I think even at 7, it was probably still correct to play. Yeah, as a spoiler, as a result of whether it was a result of Ancestral or not, Stefan did not do especially well in this tournament. I don't believe he even made it to the top 4. If I'm recalling the top 4 correctly, I think he didn't even make it out of his group. So definitely an interesting choice. This is the deck that I would have called kind of like the boogeyman of this era. Mono red and this deck really occupied to put metagame pressure on both ends, because if you wanted to play something greedy, it had to be able to beat mono red, and if you wanted to play something that was kind of more geared towards beating mono red and was mid-rangey, it had to have game against Blue Moon. Those were the metagame pressures that kind of existed. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think that Adam winning the tournament with Black-White is an interesting outcome for this year, because I think most people would have had a blue mid-range deck, and specifically a Blue Moon mid-range deck or a control deck probably winning the tournament, but it was not to be. So yeah, so this is Blue Moon. Very cool. I mean, JR played this list, like I said. There's 2 videos. Our last 2 videos are JR playing modern updates of this list, and I will tell you, it's not that different. Like, it's probably 25 cards different, something like that. But a lot of these things still end up in there. There is some like old technology here, like Overwhelming Denial. This is just a callback to a bygone era when we had massive stack battles, and it was super common for there to be, 3 or 4 counter spells cast, trying to fight over an ancestral or fighting over a madcap experiment, or well, probably not a madcap experiment, but but over like an ancestral recall, or things of that ilk, or a blood moon. Blood moon locked a lot of the other control decks out of the game at the time. So yeah, very cool. I really this is a blast from the past for me looking at this list for sure. Uh, I remember losing to this a lot. I remember playing lists like this. I top forward a challenge, or like a weekend tournament that we did, like a cut to top 8 tournament, playing pretty close to this list, except I splashed black and white. It was the old double splash, the Liam Coughlin classic, the old 2-color 4-color deck, where I splashed Unburial Rites with my Gifts on Given, so that I had more ways to Platinum Empyrean people. And I played against my good friend in the top 8, I think it was, on mono red. And he killed Platinum Empyrean twice, and I put it into play 3 times. I madcapped it into play, he killed it. I Unburial Rites it, he killed it. I flashed back Unburial Rites, and then I won the game. So yeah, this was a sweet one. And Platinum Empyrean is a card that I think you might even still be able to play now. This madcap for Platinum Empyrean thing, I don't know. It was really, really good, and people have been shaving their number of disenchants, to be honest. Recently there are fewer of them, and the removal is more conditional these days. So I kind of think Platts might have its day in the sun yet again. Okay, next we have Kevin B. This is Kevin Bosta. Bosta, yeah, you'll note here, 4-color Bosta midrange. This is basically like 4-color no blue aggro midrange. This was the deck that he was best known for. And then Gruul aggro and Gruul monsters. Really a red-green mage at heart, and then sometimes he added some spice. Yeah, Kevin was one of 2 players to qualify with 10 QPs. I think Spencer and I both had him on playing some green-red X deck. Yeah, Spencer, yeah, down with islands. This is propaganda. And then what did I say? I said, I don't expect Kevin to stray from what got him to this position in the first place. Powerful green and red cards, and then might include some non-blue colors as well. Yeah, but his deck list is virtually guaranteed to start with Taiga and Stomping Ground. And I was right. He did register Taiga and Stomping Ground. Here they are. But yeah, he decided to go with the classic, the four color kind of aggro. I've titled it aggro because I think people looking at the deck list now will say this is an aggro deck. At the time, this was actually kind of considered like aggro mid-range, like it was both. But I think if you look at it now, you would call this an aggro deck. There's really a lot of 1-drops. So what's going on in this deck? We've got all of the 1-drops you could feasibly play, you know, like Curd Ape, Experiment 1, Bloodsoaked Champion. I talked about it when talking about Chris's deck. Diregraph Ghoul, Isamaru, Hound of Konda, Narnum Renegade. This was a 1 green. It's a green mana for a 1/2 death touch, but if you triggered Revolt, it was a 2/3 death touch, which like was actually kind of a house in some aggro matchups. Sky Shroud Elite. This is another card from a bygone era. This is 1 green. This is just a single green for a 1/1. But if your opponent controls a non-basic land, it's a 1/2 or it's a 2/3. So these are just all, you know, 2 power 1-drops. It's massive, massive numbers of them. And then from there, you kind of go up the chain with other powerful cards. You've got like Green Wheel Liberator. This was another sweet one from this era. This was 1 and a green for a 2/1, but if you triggered Revolt, it was a 4/3. So that put the clock on real fast. And then, yeah, like you would go up the chain and play like all the good ones. Like Falcon Wrath Aristocrat was a big draw to being black-red. This was a card that let you fly over moat, which wasn't nothing. And also this was relatively well insulated against red removal if you could keep other things on the board, which that is a big if, but it was definitely something you would like to do. Cards I talked about before, like Camball, another anti-combo card, Kitchen Finks. This deck is much, much lower on effects that would be used. Like there's not very many hate bears in this deck, right? Man, a Danto Vanguard was legal at this time. That makes me feel old. I can't believe that. Yeah, like Anafenza the Foremost is a sweet one. Saskia the Unyielding, this one was really sick. So like Saskia basically doubled all damage that you dealt. You would play it, you would choose your opponent because they were the only player you would choose. And then it says like whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to the chosen player, which so it just means that you deal double damage. So Saskia was another sick one that this deck got to play. And then yeah, you were combining that with most of the best spells. You had access to like swords. Kevin, notably ahead of his time, not playing Path to Exile. Love to see it. You don't really need to in this deck that has access to a million other removal spells, but it's nice to see someone thinking about this even in 2017. So yeah, you've got like, you know, Bolt, Helix, Abrade. This is a consideration for killing Platinum Empyrean. Same thing with Anguished Unmaking and Kolagon's Command. You've got your Vindicate, Gerard's Verdict appearing again, anti-mono red card, pretty good against control as well. Honestly, maybe we should be registering more Gerard's Verdict. Maybe I'll play a deck soon that registers some of these old boomer cards. Rise Fall is a sweet one. This is like just another kind of Hymn to Turok effect, where it's like target player reveals 2 cards from his or her hand and then discards each non-land card. So it's not quite him, but it's him for spells, which is like, it's decent. It can be okay. I don't think we would register this one anymore just because it's a little too random. In terms of points, this was Mox Jet, Mox Emerald. So that's 6 in today's era. So let's find the other points. I believe Umezawa's Jite is 2 of them. So now we're up to 8. Then we've got Mind Twist is 9. And then is it Stone? Yeah. And then Stoneforge Mystic is the 10th point. So, yeah, like a pretty potent deck. Kevin did pretty well. He made it out of his group. Playing this deck, and this was a deck that I really struggled to play. I think this deck is quite hard to play, actually, or it was at the time. It felt like if you made a wrong choice that you were just like so far behind all of a sudden. And but yeah, Kevin was very good at finding the right spots. He won a bunch of tournaments playing like exactly this deck. Like it was incredibly powerful for him. Yeah, and I mean, if you look at this list now, we would upgrade the creature suite. The spell suite is kind of there already, right? Like you would just register most of these spells still. You'd upgrade, you'd play a few new ones, but most of this stuff is just right there. And with the modern organization of the points list, you'd get an extra Mox in this deck too. Or I guess maybe you might pay points for like Mingskin Boo and WPA and things like that. But yeah, at this time, there was no such thing as paying points for creatures unless they were like Stoneforge Mystic or True Name Nemesis. Those were kind of some of the only fair creatures on the list. So yeah, so this is 4-color Basta, very sick aggro deck, very powerful, kind of emblematic of how the aggro decks of the time were built. Moxes, and then 1-drops, and then whatever your colors offered as the follow-up in the best 2 and 3, and you really needed 1-drop draws. You'll see, right? Like Kevin's deck is making a lot of considerations to try and have at least 1-drop, and ideally having 2 a lot of the time was something that these decks were interested in. Okay, so last but certainly not least, we have Pat B with Kiki Pod. So Pat Verduzco actually recorded a reaction to his game that's one of his games that's on camera from this top 8. I'll link it in the description. Pat's a good friend. So I was actually talking to him about this before I filmed the video, and he was reminiscing about how sweet this top 8 was and how much he's thought about a bunch of those games, like even now. And spoiler alert, Pat did make it to the finals. So the finals was Adam against Pat, and there are some great games. Pat played this 4-color like Kiki Pod, Birthing Pod deck, and he also played Grixis Vault a bit, but really Pat is really directly associated with Kiki Pod and with 4-color Pod, broadly speaking. For my money, he might be the best creature combo pilot ever. Pat wins games that look so unwinnable to me, and he makes it look easy. It's really crazy. It's funny. I was talking to him about the points list now, and as a funny anecdote, Pat like mostly registers creature combo decks, like pod decks. And then like he played like Seeker Walk, like once that was a thing, and he's kind of the person who built that deck in the first place. But he moved away from Victoria a couple of years ago, and he was back last week, registered Kiki Pod with like a couple of new cards, but like hasn't played Highlander in like a year, and just, you know, casually 4-0'd the tournament, got a QP. What a sicko. And he played against like pretty hard matchups too. Like he played against like blue black tempo, and I think he played against like a mono black deck as well. Like, oh, mono blue. He played against like mono blue tempo. Like decks with like a bunch of interaction, and he just jammed through it playing OG Kiki Pod, which is pretty sick. So yeah, I think Spencer and I both said we were very sure that he was going to register Kiki Pod. Yeah, like the deck was called Pat Pod for a long time. It's worth noting, that Time Walk got changed. Its points value got changed. Time Walk was 4 points at one point, not that long before this tournament. Oh, sorry. So we have Time Walk going from 6 to 5. Am I looking at the right changes here? Man, maybe I was looking at the wrong list this whole time. Time Walk from 5 to 6. And then August 23rd, Time Walk from 6 to 5. Yeah, we lowered it again. And then points list as of December 4th. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm right. Because then this change was in June. Yeah. Okay, so Walk was 5 at the time. And what's notable about Walk being 5 is Pat, when he was originally building this deck, was playing it with Time Walk, and he kind of discovered that like Time Walk was secretly the best card in Kiki Pod, and that he was winning more games by just assembling Time Walk plus Eternal Witness loops than he was like almost anything else. Like you would assemble like Kiki Eternal Witness Time Walk or things like that, or you would just flicker your Eternal Witness a couple of times to cast multiple Time Walks and just attack your opponent to death. And you might be thinking, oh, that's weird. No Spellseeker in this deck and no Time Walk. Well, Spellseeker was printed this year. It was printed June of 2018. So it was printed after this tournament happened. And obviously once it was printed, he went back to playing Walk, and Spellseeker was like super problematic, and this deck was busted for a long time. But it was one of those decks that was weird to point because not that many people could win with it. Like it's a hard deck to play. Creature combo broadly, I think, is pretty challenging to play. And so it would be one of those things where I vividly remember being on the council and advocating for points changes to creature combo, because, you know, Pat was crushing with it and other people were picking up wins with it. But the notion was, well, you know, like the deck is hard to play, so you don't necessarily want to punish people for playing their hard to play deck well, which I do understand to an extent. So we didn't end up making as many changes. But once Spellseeker got printed and this deck got like to do the whole Seeker Walk thing, it really got supercharged. And then obviously Ephemerate got printed, and the rest is history. And Pat has won a bunch with that iteration of the deck as well. But this is just your bog standard Kiki Pod deck. So you are trying to win with, you can build a loop with Pod in this deck where you can start from, I believe you need a 2 in the way that this deck is constructed. You can build it to work with a 1, but I don't think he built it to work with a 1 for this tournament. Yeah, okay, so I think it starts with a 2. You go up, you get Bounding Crisis or one of your other untappers. You untap, you sack Bounding Crisis, you get Felidar Guardian, you flicker the Pod, you sack Felidar Guardian, you get Revelark, you get back your Felidar Guardian and something else. Or sorry, no, you don't get Revelark. You get Karmic Guide, sorry. Get back your Felidar Guardian, flicker the Pod again, then you sacrifice the Felidar Guardian again, and you get, wow, how am I'm forgetting this combo so badly. Because you flicker and then you flicker. Yeah, so you sack Felidar Guardian, get Kiki. Kiki copies Karmic Guide. Karmic Guide gets back Felidar Guardian. Felidar Guardian Kiki Jiki is an infinite loop, and you win the game. So it takes like 8 life and 4 mana and a 2-drop to win the game. Obviously, there are other ways, like starting from a 3, it costs 6 life. You can just go 3 straight into the Felidar Guide Guardian loop. And the rest of this deck is built around getting that combo set up and kind of like surviving. So you've got things like Recruiter of the Guard here to help find some combo pieces. This finds Kiki Jiki. You will notice we are still playing actual Splinter Twin in this era. So we're still just in some games playing Exarch Twin, which is pretty cool. You've got interactive pieces like Glenelendra Archmage to fight the blue decks. You've also got Spell Queller, similarly, as a way to kind of force things through. Woodland Bellower is a sick one. You can like get this, and then it can get the Bounding Crisis to start an untap loop, which is pretty sweet. And all this to say, like, this deck is very cool. Classic throwback Goblin Settler. I cannot tell you how many lands Pat Goblin Settlered in 2017. It was a lot. And sometimes he would just win games because he would like get Goblin Settler in play, flicker it with Restoration Angel, flicker it with Felidar Guardian, and then like you would just have 1 land in play and you would just die to getting attacked to death. Other things that I would point out that are interesting about this list, we've got Aether Vial. I know Pat registered Aether Vial when he won the tournament last week. So so he's still on this card. I don't know. I mean, when you don't have it on turn 1, it's pretty bad. But when you do have it on turn 1, the rationale is that it makes like 10 mana if you get to put it into play right away. Pretty low on tutors. There are more of these now, so this deck obviously did get better. One thing that I think is really fascinating about this deck list is the whopping 7 planeswalkers that are in this deck. And this is partially a testament of this is how this deck attacked control decks. You used Elf into 3 or 4 mana planeswalker as a way to put something pretty hard to interact with on the table, and you could use that as a way to kind of bait out interaction to be able to potentially combo or to just straight up win the game with a lot of these planeswalkers. 7 is a massive number, right? Like we don't play this number of planeswalkers anymore, but the green decks in this era of Highlander were really in on planeswalker effects. Cradlehoof is another example of a deck that played like 5 or 6, 7 planeswalkers at this time. And it was because it was the best way to attack. Specifically blue-white. Blue-white had a particularly hard time with blue planeswalkers, and Blue Moon, if they couldn't keep them off the table, similarly, like it was pretty challenging for them to interact with them. Other things that this deck has going on that are like very much so, I think, indications of a player who has played just countless reps of the deck are like this concession to play like Ramanap Excavator. It's not doing anything like especially degenerate. Like there's no fast bond or anything like that. Like we do have Strip Mine and we do have Wasteland, so you can kind of go on this like land attack plan where you're just trying to lock your opponent out. But mostly this is here as a way to generate value because the Kiki combo is so expensive. It costs so much mana. Like if you want to play pod and win the game on the turn you play pod, you need like 7 mana a lot of the time. So Ramanap is also just a nice nod to the fact that you wouldn't mind being able to replay a fetch land and getting it and get a new land every turn. Like this deck would happily hit land drops until turn 7. Like it really would. Cards that are in this deck that I think are kind of emblematic of that era, like Jade Light Ranger is a pretty sweet one from Ixalan, the original Ixalan set, the old double explore, potentially a 4/3 a lot of the time, just finding lands. Very cool. Like Imperial Recruiter, this is like a card that you don't really see played very much anymore because its main functionality is finding Kiki-Jiki. Now I guess you'll see this card played as a way to find Thassa's Oracle, but beyond that, it's not super widely used. But yeah, so this deck, I mean, I love this deck. This deck is so cool, and I think I do want to try and play some Kiki combo at some point, some Kiki pods soon. Maybe I'll take Pat's list out for a spin against one of the guys. But yeah, Pat made it to the finals. It's worth noting. He did lose in the finals, but they were really good games, and this was obviously a great showing. So yeah, that was the year that was. That was the top 8 that was. These were the deck lists. And yeah, like I said, Adam won, Pat was in the finals, and then I want to say the other 2 semifinalists were Kevin and Chris. So despite it being a year dominated by blue mid-range decks and blue control decks, actually the top 4, there was like almost nary a blue card. Pat was the only one playing blue cards, and only sort of. Oh, I guess one other thing to point out, and this is something that's kind of funny because I talked to Pat about this the other day. You'll notice this list is 4 points, but at the time, this list was 10. So Strip Mine plus Mox Emerald was 5. And then at the time, Birthing Pod was, I think, 3 still. Yeah, so Pod was 3. So that brings you up to 8. And then Survival of the Fittest was 2. So that's 10. So you didn't get access to any of these other things. And when I was talking to Pat about it, Pat was sort of saying like, yeah, like I went to register my deck and like the points list is configured such that like I just get like Spellseeker for free, Birthing Pod, and Survival for free. Like he was just like, well, I guess I just get to play a Mox for free. He wasn't even sure. Like he like added like Mox WPA to his deck along with Time Walk, but he was kind of stunned at how many free points the deck had gotten over the years. And I do think there might be something to that. I kind of think the creature combo points have slowly fallen off the list because people have forgotten, but I kind of think this deck is still really good. Obviously not like literally this configuration, but I think Seeker Walk is actually still really strong, and I think it'll be interesting to see if more people pick it up. Obviously, Pat showed up having played maybe 0 games of Highlander in 2025 and spiked a tournament playing it, so like it can't be that bad. Yeah. So anyway, this was the year that was. The year that was 2017. I'm going to link everything in the description, so you'll get links to the article, the points list document. Again, shout out to Genghis Prawn for doing that. It's a really awesome resource to go check out. I'll link all 8 deck lists, and I'll link a video to the actual I'll link the video, which is the actual gameplay if you are interested. Be forewarned, I am commentating in that video with short hair and no beard. I look really weird. But it is me. I promise it is still me. So I hope you enjoy the video. Please consider liking and subscribing. I really appreciate it. And if you want to see me do more of this kind of content, I can try. This is the year that I have the most context for, because I was there, because I was commentating, but I think we could probably put together some other, blasts from the past, look at some retro deck lists, some older tournaments, and talk about those too. So without further ado, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.